I just want to thank you all for joining us today for this talk, Curating Virtual Exhibitions with Abu Dhabi Art Fair. My name is Aimee Dawson. I'm the Associate Digital Editor at the Art newspaper, and today I'll be talking to the curators of the geographically focused sections of the fair, which cover the UAE, India, South Korea, and Africa. This is the 12th edition of Abu Dhabi Art, and this year it's opened as a virtual fair. I think we all know why, the dreaded C word. But this year is a record lineup of 68 international galleries and works by more than 200 artists. So we encourage you all to go online, check out the booths from the comfort of your sofa. The fair officially opens online today, and all these curated sections can be viewed on the website, which is abudhabiart.ae. So for this talk, I will speak to each of the 4 curators individually, who give a short presentation about their section, and then I'll ask them a couple of questions. There will be time at the end, hopefully, if we keep to time, for questions from the audience. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to send through any questions you may have, and we'll get to them at the end. So if we can have our panelists join us on the screen. Okay, so first of all, we'll be talking to Nada Raza. She's the curator of the UAE-focused gallery sector, A Picture Held as Captive, this year at Abu Dhabi Art. Just a little bit of a background about Nada. She's the curatorial advisor for the Al Sakal Arts Foundation team and the founding artistic director of the Ashara Art Foundation in Dubai. Prior to this, Nada was a research curator at Tate Research Centre Asia, with a particular focus on South Asia. At Ashara, Nada curated Altered Inheritance, Home as a Foreign Place with Shilpa Gupta and Zarina Hashmi, and Bodybuilding, a thematic exhibition of lens-based work, both in 2019, among many other shows with artists from the region. So thanks for joining us, Nada.
Hi, Amy. Thank you.
No worries. If you want to talk a little bit about your presentation for Abu Dhabi Art.
Thank you. I think we've got some slides, so if we could have the presentation. So A Picture Held as Captive is a response to the invitation from Art Abu Dhabi to produce an online exhibition focusing on artists who are represented by galleries in the UAE. And I sort of responded by thinking about what it is that this move to digital exhibitions means curatorially. And really thinking about how this move to bring exhibitions online means that a certain kind of art gets privileged, or perhaps also that we're trying to do the same thing that we would be doing in the physical world, in the virtual world, without really paying enough attention to the technology itself and what both its limitations, but also what its possibilities are. And I was thinking these thoughts as I was approaching work by artists that are familiar to me because I've been in and out of the UAE for many years. But also this was an opportunity for me to do a bit of curatorial research and look back into the last 2 decades of practice by the artists who I sort of either already know and admire or I wanted to know more about. So the show brings together 8 artists from 5 galleries. And I decided also to play with the format and really kind of use that social media FOMO technique and present only 1 artist or 1 practice per day. So it'll be a different work and something new for each day of the fair, and which is really kind of a playful take on this idea that, you know, even digitally, you just have to sort of be there at the right time. So I'm not going to give it all away. I'm not actually going to talk about the whole show, but I've picked out a few highlights to talk about today. The opening work of the show, which is online today, is a video by Farah Al-Qasimi, represented by the third line at Al Sakal. Farah is an Emirati artist, and the work I selected is a video from 2018 titled "Everybody Was Invited to a Party." And of course, you know, that's playing with the idea that on the first day of the fair, we would normally all hopefully be invited to a party. And it's kind of acknowledging that while, of course, everything's moved online, that sort of social aspect, which, let's face it, apart from the fact that fun seems to have been cancelled this year, was really where we all met each other, where we collected, right? So it's also kind of pointing towards that. But actually, the work relates back to the title of the show. A Picture Held as Captive is a quote from Wittgenstein, and I was thinking really, and the reason that I chose this quote was thinking about image and language and the slippages in between, and the fact that even when we're using images, we're still limited in being able to describe them through language. And so Farah's video is based on the Arabic version of Sesame Street, and really playfully looks at the kind of confusion and lack of nuance that can happen in that process of trying to communicate and trying to learn a new language. And I feel like for those of us who are not digital natives, you know, moving into this world of technology is very much that sort of experience. Sometimes there are these dissonances that happen. I'll give a little teaser for the work that you're going to see tomorrow, if I could have the next slide. And the practice I'm focusing on tomorrow is Sara Maheri. Sara is also an Emirati artist, very young, represented by Carbon 12. And what I was really struck by while looking through and getting to know Sara was that over lockdown, she has, together with a group of peers and artists that she admires, started her own YouTube channel and a series of artist talks. And I think one of the really extraordinary things that we've witnessed this year is this kind of radical generosity, especially from the art world and the culture world, where we have all pivoted and we've put all our work online, mostly for free. And I think, you know, when we look back at this time, that will be one of the really extraordinary things that we'll remember. And I was really impressed by Sara's ability to bring groups of people, to choose an artist, bring them together. It's very professionally done. But also there's a sort of spirit of camaraderie and collectivity that again really comes through in the series of artist talks. And while, of course, this is on the Dhabi Art website as a feature for the next few days, this is also on her YouTube channel, and I would encourage people to go, you know, if you're curious about younger artists and practice in the Gulf, the Artist Talk series is excellent. And I'll talk a little bit, I guess, about the closing work of the show, because it shows the kind of research that went into the project and actually how much I enjoyed putting it together. And so the closing work is a work by Hassan Sharif, and Hassan Sharif, of course, is the late great sort of very internationally recognized artist who worked a lot with assemblage, but also had a conceptual practice. And this work from 1984 is called a one-day exhibition, and this is documentation of a happening that took place in Sharjah soon after he had returned from the Byam Shaw School of Art and was really trying this radical experimentation, both with his work, but also with the forms in which it was presented. And when I came across this, I really enjoyed that sort of synchronicity over time between what I was trying to do with this, showing one practice per day for 10 days, and that impulse of the one-day exhibition, which at the time, I think really challenged and questioned the audiences that he was addressing. And so that for me is this kind of really interesting counterpoint to this project. But of course, you will have to come back every day and come back on the last day of the fair to learn more about the work. I'm going to stop there because I know that my fellow curators are going to present next, but thank you.
Thanks, Nada. I think it's really interesting how you kind of, I know that you've done a lot of work putting exhibitions online this year so far with Al Sakal, and the way that you've engaged with how to create an exhibition that really speaks to the digital, that really engages and brings in engagement, I think is really fascinating. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, which is kind of a bit like philosophical, having kind of read more about your presentation, is about Hassan Sharif, because he's kind of like a godfather of Emirati art. And sometimes I think about these times that we're in, and I wonder, what would people who have sadly passed think of such a time now? Because obviously no one saw such a thing coming. And so I wondered, what do you think that Hassan Sharif would make of these COVID times and moving art into the digital, given how experimental and ephemeral his work was during his time?
I think that's a tough question to answer. But I think, because it's hard to say if you're thinking only about the move from material to digital, because you might then make the assumption that people who are very committed to a sort of material practice might disapprove. But actually, I don't think it's about form. I think it's always still about content. And I think that if you could convince artists such as Hassan Sharif or other senior figures that their work was being properly communicated, that people were still sort of accessing it and understanding the intent and the meaning and the motivation behind the work fully, they might be more open to it. And I think my criticism, if any, of moving to this format without really paying attention to how we're engaging audiences means that you will then slide into that quick swipe sort of way of art being consumed. I think the challenge for us as curators is to produce things that are interesting enough and sort of complex enough that you can still get the same level of engagement that you might in a gallery or in a museum setting. So I think if I could convince him of that, perhaps he wouldn't have minded so much.
And like you say, there have been many challenges to bringing exhibitions into the virtual. Could you give us maybe one kind of lesson that you've taken from it, you know, from the experience?
I think one of the most extraordinary things that I did this year was bringing the Mohammad Malehi exhibition to life at Al Sarkal during the pandemic. And the show is closing this weekend. We were supposed to do it in March, but of course we had to postpone. And we still managed to bring the show to life in September. And we extended it. And, Mohammad Malehi passed away a few weeks ago of COVID in Paris. And my last conversation with him was that he still wanted to come to Dubai and he still wanted to see see the exhibition. And of course, we'd done a 3D virtual, we'd done lots of online programming. We'd done everything we could possibly do to make it sort of work remotely across all of the challenges and distances. But I think that's been the toughest thing for me, is not being able to bring him here and not being able to be in the same space with him.
It's incredible that you were able to make such an important exhibition happen in light of, his death and the situation that we're in. So in a way, it's great in many ways that it is online so that even more people can enjoy it.
That's true. And we've done a 3D rendering of the exhibition. And actually, I have to say, I was very skeptical at the start, but actually it's worked very well.
Amazing. Thank you, Nada. I'm going to move on now to our second curator. I will come back. If you have any questions for Nada, then please do send them through and we'll come back to them at the end. So our second curator is Ashwin Thadani, who is the curator for the second year running of the gallery sector India Today at Abu Dhabi Art. Ashwin founded Gallery Issa in 2011 and has since established the gallery as a leading proponent of international contemporary art on the Indian subcontinent. He has been deeply committed to the growth of the gallery since its inception and has played an integral role in exhibiting works of several critically acclaimed international artists, such as Diana Al-Hadid, Ali, I apologize for my pronunciation, Banj Sada, Adrian Gheni, Oliver Eliasson, and Idris Khan, among others. So thanks for joining us, Ashwin.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you can maybe tell us just a short bit about your presentation at Abu Dhabi Art this year, and then I'll ask a couple of questions.
Sure. So this year we're going to be 6 galleries in my section. 4 of the galleries have already taken part last year. We have 2 new galleries that are coming for the first time. Both galleries are from Delhi, which is Threshold Gallery and Exhibit 320. We had a wonderful time last year, and the galleries who came for the first time also had a great time. We had a whole group of collectors from India that came and took part in the fair and the program that was lined up. So Diala thought we should continue the conversation, especially with given the fact that Abu Dhabi and the UAE has so many Indians living there since a long time, and there's a deep commitment towards art in that region from India. So the slide you see now on your screen is Gallery Threshold from New Delhi, and they are bringing 3 of their artists in their program. And I'd like to highlight the work of Chicago-based Indian artist Shaurya Kumar, whose works are based on art history, on his memories, and he makes these very beautiful, fragile works of gold leaf. This incredible work is inspired by the 18th century poet Mir Taqi Mir, and the poem is titled That Ruined Place, and some of the lines inscribed on the work is from that particular poem. Alongside this particular work, you'll see a suite of smaller works done in the similar medium by the same artist. Very intricate, very beautiful, goes back to personal notations, memories, poetry, history. So I must highlight this artist in particular because I saw his works at the India Art Fair this year and last year, and I thought it would work very well to introduce his work at Abu Dhabi Art. We can move to the next gallery, which is Gallery Isa, Exhibit 320, yes. Exhibit 320 is also coming for the first time. It's another gallery from Delhi. It was established in 2009. It's got a nice program. It's a boutique gallery. They take part at the India Art Fair regularly. And here I'd like to highlight the work of the wonderful Samakshi Singh, whose works are intricately made with lace and thread. Beautiful works inspired through garden and garden architecture. She uses many forms of the garden within the space of art as a means of discovery for herself and her viewers. So this is an artist which has had great recognition in India. She had an exhibition at the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art that opened alongside the India Art Fair this year in February, and the entire body of works was bought by that museum. We can move to the next gallery, Gallery Isa. And here we have a selection of works, and I'd like to highlight the work on the left-hand side of Pakistani artists based in Dubai, Maha Ahmad, whose works are inspired through miniature art and Japanese techniques of painting. She's very young, and she lives in Dubai, and she has representation in London and Berlin. And her exhibition recently in London was a huge success. Alongside her work is the renowned Syrian-American artist, Diana Al-Hadid, large drawing and 2 wonderful panels at the back of the booth. Diana Al-Hadid was exhibited last year also at Abu Dhabi Art, and I think everyone in the UAE is pretty much knows about her practice. We also fortunately have a nice work of Idris Khan at the stand, and of course Idris Khan is very well known in Abu Dhabi because of the large outdoor sculpture he created 3 years ago. We can move to the next gallery. Gallery Espas from New Delhi comes back again. It's a long-standing gallery from Delhi. And here I'd like to mention and highlight the works of G.R. Irana, one of India's senior contemporary artists. His works are inspired by spirituality, by landscapes, by modernization of the world in today's time. In this particular large-scale work, you can see an orchid cherry blossom tree, as you may perceive it, with a whole group of Buddhist monks in the same vicinity of the tree. There's a smaller work on the right-hand side where he talks about scaffolding, which is something which is very common, and we see in India with several of the old structures being brought down, being repaired, and it's a common feature which he portrays in this work. We move to the next gallery, which is Grosvenor Gallery. Grosvenor Gallery is based in London, and they do work closely with Asian artists, with Indian artists, and they were there in Abu Dhabi Art last year too. And I'd like to highlight the work of British artist Olivia Fraser, who has lived in India for several years. It's at the back of the stand on the left-hand side. The two works of Olivia Fraser. So Olivia is deeply inspired by Indian miniature art, Rajasthani art, Pichwai art. She studied all those techniques in India. She's lived in India. She has a deep connection with India. And these are recent works from her Lotus series. We also have a notable Sri Lankan artist in the stand on the right-hand side, Seneca, who's based in Colombo and has representation internationally and in India. And he paints typically the monsoon rainforests. Yeah, that's correct. And we move to the last gallery, which is Verdera Art Gallery, which is in one of India's oldest galleries, established in 1987, based in New Delhi, coming back to Abu Dhabi Art after a good experience last year. And here I'd like to highlight the work of photographic artist Sachin George Sebastian, who typically makes this assemblage of photographs inspired by Islamic architecture of the 18th and 19th century. So those are the 6 galleries that is part of the India Today section at Abu Dhabi Art 2020. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashwin. It's also great to see it kind of in situ there in the virtual fair, so people can know what to expect if they delve in online. I wanted to ask you, how did you go about choosing these 6 galleries in particular for your India Today focus?
I think it's helped me deeply to be part of Abu Dhabi Art over the last few years. And after having participated over these past years at Abu Dhabi Art, I have a fair sense of the art market, of this region, the desirability of collectors, and what even institutions look for. Keeping this in mind, I have studied carefully the program of the various galleries in India, and I have then reached out to them who I feel could have a reception, a good reaction at Abu Dhabi Art. I mean, I wasn't prepared for this till Diala convinced me to take on this challenge because, it's a small community of galleries in India, and it's a new market in Abu Dhabi. They haven't come before. So it's always a little skeptical for them to take the plunge the first time. But I guess with a long drawn conversation, with convincing, it worked out. And I mean, we had these 6 galleries who came last year. We had a wonderful time. Several serious collectors who made their way also helped enhancing the motivation with the whole group. And this year we have 2 new galleries, and fingers crossed it all goes well. And I mean, look forward to future such collaborations with India and Abu Dhabi.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Ashwin. We're going to move on now to our third speaker, our third curator, Sung-Woo Kim, who's the curator of the South Korea-focused gallery sector, Material Real, at Abu Dhabi Art this year. So I'll just read a little bio for him. He's an independent curator and writer who's interested in curatorial methodologies that produce and pose questions relating to time and space, and investigates how to reflect individuals' subjectivities in the form of exhibition. Kim directed the curatorial program and management of Amado Art Space in Seoul, and was appointed as an artistic director in the curatorial collective formed for the Gwangju Biennale 2018. This year, he was appointed as a curatorial advisor for the Busan Biennial. So, if you want to give a little presentation about what your section offers this year at the fair.
Hello, this is Sung Kim, a curator for Korean contemporary art sector. My sector's title is Material Real. For the sector, I firstly considered what context I needed to focus on Korean contemporary art. Like other nations and its cultures, contemporary art of Korea is very complex and make dynamism in such complexity. Actually, for me, it is not easy thing to simplify what is today's Korean art. And I make a title, Material Real, which is focused on the material experiments of contemporary artists in Korea. Everyone might see in the media, today's Korea is creating quite interesting events internationally, especially such as the spread of Korean culture and creation of trends through its pop culture, like a BTS wave, something like that. However, at the same time, it has a various conflict inherently under the brilliant surfaces of today's Korean society. For instance, the conflict between the old generation and young generation, or the sense of deprivation from the unequal distribution of wealth, and even repeating political debates completely divorced from reality. In a society in such a dramatic, rapid development, tension and division may be naturally inevitable. I think such conflicts may be understood as an object for critical thinking, as well as a mission that suggests coordinate for the society to move toward, or a driving force for social progression. So on this background, the sector which I curate shed light on the experimental practices and viewpoints of contemporary Korean artists. In the sector, I pose questions what we can see through these material experiments of artists in connection with reality of Korea today. And I understand the artistic experiments with material as a sort of questions against the urgent phenomenon happened from radical societal changes, bringing upon by various perspectives across society, culture, politics, economics, and history. So this sector is spotlighting a series of artists who respond to the hybridization of the tradition and the present, and the consideration of the changed individuality, subjectivity, and identity today, or the sensorial reflection of rapidly shifted life aspects with the emergence of new media. And the practices of artists in the sector are the output of the processes. So I postulate such a material experimentation as active artistic gestures or critical questions against a rapidly changing society in the process of resisting or accepting the phenomenon facing them in Korea today. When you see my sector, it consists of 13 artists, and each artist is displayed in 13 individual booths. And I want to highlight very few of the artists in the sector. So I want to show firstly Lee Woo-sung's work represented by Hakkoje Gallery. At the very beginning, Lee Woo-sung's work focuses on the fear of the people, especially today's young generation in Korea. In this sense, previously his works of art are considered as a post-Minjung art. Actually, the Minjung art was a Korean political and populist art movement before, and it is considered as one of the most important art movement in Korean modern art history in 1980s. And now Lee Woo-sung deals with more wide range of human beings, such as from young generation to old generation, and focuses on various emotions in community in Korea, like love, hate, fear, friendship, hospitality, and antagonism, and so on. An interesting point is he frequently uses unique material for his painting, the thin fabric. The thin fabric is primary material that Minjung art have used for its easy handling, foldable, light, and etc. It is very easy to handle and useful to paint rebellious remark on the street. So the artist of Minjung art took this material to the street and drew quickly together rebellious and antagonistic images. Lee Woo-sung appropriates this material and way, and on this way, he is more focused on the people itself, especially laborers or unstable young generations, elderlies, and homosexuals, and so on, and their ordinary humble life, frequently in figurative painting by himself. He doesn't use art as a tool for only political gesture or socio-political reactions. Rather, he wants to put diverse group of human beings and their intimate emotions in ordinary life of themselves. So most of the subject that he paints on it is the others from mainstream of society, or the others from social, cultural, religious stereotype. And one more, I want to talk about Jang Jong-won's work represented by Verdera Gallery. You can turn to the next gallery. Yes, this one. Jang Jong-won portrays the endless anxiety of human-centered societies and modern humanity, which emphasizes selfish irrationality in a peculiar warm but cynical perspective. His painting has an impression of easy and familiar and even peaceful. And at the same time, the work is full of pity and ridicule that makes the viewer discover a new meaning. The ironic landscape frequently looks like a mixture of human wishes for salvation and peaceful pastoral nature and animals. And by drawing on the animal skin, it maximizes its kitschiness and also his sarcasm to blind and insanity belief of people. So Jang Jong-won humorously twists the human desires for salvation, which is represented by utopia or heaven. And he asks in which direction what lies in our desire is headed. I think it is already time to finish my sector because it is only for 5 minutes, general introduction. So simply sum up, in my sector, material real is focused on the material experimentation of artists. And I postulated these practices as a sort of artistic reactions and critical questions towards or maybe against radical changes of society in Korea today. Thanks for listening and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. It's so incredible to see kind of how artists are utilizing completely different materials. I think that, you know, adds a whole new layer to the meanings of the things that they're painting about. I wanted to ask you a question about a topic that I know you feel very passionately about. We were talking before about how well known South Korean art is internationally, and particularly given the recent kind of rise of the huge global following of the K-pop boy band BTS, for example, and the way that that's kind of permeating the world in a very different way to how perhaps fine art from the country is. How do you feel about kind of the spread of these two different cultures into the international community?
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, and also it's a very big question. If I do a reply about it deeply, then I have to have a short lecture about that. First of all, I needed to clarify I'm not a big fan of Korean boy band group. And also I'm not a heavy listener of the songs by them. But to see the activities of BTS, it is actually very impressive. And in a way, I need to respect their activities because actually Korean culture is now spreading out abroad and creating trends via BTS and its popular culture. But it has a quite different level between pop culture and Korean fine art. BTS and its pop culture roughly could be understood in the context of culture industry. And I think it is a sort of outcomes happened from the flow of capital and capitalism. And also we need to see this phenomenon in market logic. When it comes to Korean fine art, it is a bit different. Actually, there are several Korean artists who are already very famous internationally, such as Libu, Haegyu-yang, Do Ho-seo, and so on. Actually, Libu has solo shows in many important institutions and has participated into international exhibitions like Venice Biennale and etc. She is internationally acclaimed now. And Haegyu-yang is also now one of the most influential artists in the world. Do Ho-seo is also frequently appeared in the context of nomadism. But could we see and identify what is Korean art via their activities? I don't think so. When we see their practices, could we see Korean art? Not at all. Even the nationality is not the critical point for judging their practices. They are doing very well by themselves. So to see Korean art, we need to write our own art history first. Of course, we have. But in a way, Korean art history is somehow divided and fragmentary. Even when we see Korean contemporary art, in Korean art history, it is not that long. So first of all, we needed to consider and draw a trajectory between the past of Korean art and today's Korean art. And needed to recontextualize Korean art history based on the line. For it, we needed to revisit the past and rethink, reconsider Korean art in the present, not only from the global context, but also from our own legacy, and make a new link between the past and the present. Via such a research, we need to identify Korean art's singular context and languages. And via this singularity, we can make a strong link between Korean art and its global context. Actually, this is very roughly explained, but I need to make in the time. So this is a sort of answer, and then I hope it is a sort of proper reflection about what is actually Korean art and what is really emergent issue for Korean art itself. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So we're going to move on to our last curator. Thank you for waiting so patiently. It's Simon Njami, who is the curator of the Africa Focus Gallery sector, which is called The Day After at Abu Dhabi Art this year. So just to do a brief introduction to Simon. So Simon is a Paris-based independent curator, lecturer, art critic and novelist. He was the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Revue Noire, a journal of contemporary African and extra-Occidental art. He has served as the artistic director of the first Johannesburg Art Fair, the Bamako Photography Biennial for 10 years, and Dakar Biennial. He has also co-curated the first African pavilion of the 52nd Venice Biennale in 2007. So Simon, thank you so much for being with us. It'd be great if you can give your presentation about your section at the fair.
Okay, I was interested by what Sung just said, because I think that all the territory, at least a great deal of territories, have to reinvent themselves and have to create a new identity for themselves, because as far as Africa is concerned, it's been always talked about, and there's been a kind of a consciousness to talk about instead of being talked about. So the day after deals with all these issues. The day after, of course, the first way of understanding it would be after the pandemic. It's also after the colonization. It's also after the independences. It's after so many things. How can you project yourself in a broken identity or in a broken memory? So the day after is a kind of an invitation of recentering on who we are in this global world, and to bring something that is not necessarily going by the standard of this so-called global world, who is so little when we think about it, and which is more exclusive than inclusive. So I invited 7 galleries, and again, in the way I invited them was to underline the fact that Africa lives outside of Africa, and not only inside of Africa, and that Africa is an invention that we have not yet finished to uncover. For instance, a friend of mine, when I did an exhibition called Africa Remix, there's a brilliant journalist who came to me and asked me, Mr. Njami, always putting things upside down. You call your show Africa Remix, and you invited some Egyptian artists, some Algerian artists, some Moroccan artists, and some Tunisian artists. So I just asked this guy to go and check the map that I didn't draw myself. At time, even within Africa, as a space, people don't know what is Africa. So the 7 galleries, 5 are based in Africa, and 2 are based, one in Paris and the other one, believe it or not, in Bucharest. Now, I'm going to highlight, I could have spoken about many other people, but I'm going to take 3 artists from 3 different galleries, starting with Ouattara Watts. Ouattara is a good example of this discussion on identity. People most of the time tend to limit identity to a geographical space, or to a notion of history or whatever. But in Watt's case, he considered he discovered that he was African when he went out of Africa. Because again, how can you define Africa or Africanity when you are in Africa? It reminds me of James Baldwin, who told me once that he discovered that he was Black when he went out of Harlem, because in Harlem, the Blackness or the Black issue was not important, did not exist at all. So by coming to Paris, first of all, Ouattara discovered that the way he was talked about in Paris had nothing to do with what he thought he were when he was in Ivory Coast. But then he was trapped into this dichotomy, colonizer, colonized, since Ivory Coast was once a French colony. And he met Jean-Michel Basquiat in Paris, and Basquiat told him, stop wasting your time in Paris. There's nothing for you to do here. You should come to New York. And it's in New York when he arrived there that Ouattara completed his style. This is not Ouattara. And there he discovered jazz music. He discovered a lot of things that he felt were a part of himself. And this is where he started to paint with jazz music on his background. This is how he claimed jazz as being a part of his Africanity. And he discovered also symbols of ancient Egypt. He created his own symbols, and he brought forth some Ivorian symbols that he would not consider when he was living in Ivory Coast. So the day after in that particular case is also the note after, because when you're playing jazz music, and especially when you're improvising, you never know what is the next note. Of course, you know the background, you know in which key you're playing, but you always have to decide what will be the next note. So his paintings, according to him, are an attempt to render visible the music and its vibration, and to show how many complexity there is in what one calls identity. Now let's move to the next one. Okay, here we're dealing with Richard. Richard, who is from Kampala, Uganda, and who's playing with, again, this notion of who are we, self-definition, etc., etc. He's working with recycled material, but not in an attempt to do some arte pauvre or whatever sort, but in order to recycle in the very sense of it, like to give an everlasting life to things. Because again, it's part of the animism where things are alive. There's not only human beings. So using this material, he depicts those features, those silhouettes. And when you look at them, you wonder if they're entering a kind of decay, or they're just being born. They're not completed yet. So it's up to the viewer to decide if it is a story about disaggregation and disappearance, or it is a new life, a new attempt to re-become and to redefine the parameters we've been living with and under. And the third one, who's a younger, and the selection of those three artists I'm presenting is Terence. Terence is from Zimbabwe, and he lives and works in Zimbabwe. And Terence, who is busy with globalization, addressing globalization, this is not the work, it's his culture, with a face standing, that's the one. And here one can see immediately the conflict or the dichotomy that one can face when you're living in a former colony. On the one hand, you have the Shona-like sculpture. The Shona sculpture is a traditional way of sculpting in Zimbabwe. And of course, he reinterpreted it with some cowries, some jewels, etc., to show this fetish-like figure. And it's standing on a telephone. And the telephone has a double meaning. First of all, that of modernity, however we describe it, modernity that was brought in Africa by colonization. So it's at the same time a reminder of colonization on this crazy attempt of creating a universality that would be based on European beliefs. At the same time, this telephone is also underlining the fact that wherever we are nowadays, we're connected. We're connected to the whole world, but we cannot be properly connected if we forget where we're coming from, if we just enter this mass production, this easy music, this easy art, that we have to bear witness for who we are in order to be able to communicate with the others.
I'm on mute. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Those artists are like brilliantly diverse and very interesting looking pieces. Just a reminder to the audience that if you have any questions, please send them through ASAP, and we will have time for one or two at the end. A quick question from me that I wanted to ask you, Simon, is about, you had the hardest challenge, arguably, of all the curators we've spoken to, because you had the job of condensing an entire continent into a fair booth rather than just a country. How did you go about such a theme? How did you go about, choosing the artists and the galleries that you wanted?
First of all, and it's, I think, a prerequisite Africa is still facing. People talk about Africa when Africa does not exist, in my opinion. So it was interesting for me to deconstruct any kind of notion of a monolithic Africa. Even if when you go to South Africa, a lot of South Africans don't share the same history. There were even enemies, quote unquote, so to say. So when you cannot define or describe South Africa, how could you define a whole continent? So I invited galleries from different places: South, Central, Northern, Western, Eastern, and some galleries from France and from Bucharest, just to show that Africa was not only about Africa. And I tried to show a different generation of artists dealing with the same issues, but in different manners. When you look at what Sara, and when you look at Richard, or when you look at Terence, it's always about who the hell am I in this changing world? What's my history? How can I show myself to the world? How can I appear? How can I put something under this simple letter that is I? In order precisely to introduce people who probably know nothing about art coming from Africa, to introduce them to diversity or to the complexity of a continent. For me, it was a kind of an introduction, a challenging introduction, but the real story is yet to come.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think you've taken on that challenge brilliantly, and I hope that visitors enjoy the virtual fair. I don't think we have any questions from the audience, so I just want to thank you all for attending this talk. Thank you to the curators for speaking with us and sharing their insights into curating their exhibitions and bringing their artists and galleries. And thank you to Abu Dhabi Art for hosting the talk. Please do check out the fair online, abudhabiart.ae, and it runs until the 26th of November. And yes, thank you all so much.